For the Detroit Lions, the free agency period has definitely been a quiet one. But could it be possible that Brad Holmes is still planning to do something bold? We're going to talk about it in this episode, folks, and the idea might not seem that outrageous. Stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So, folks, as I said in my previous episode today, I'm pretty confident that at this point, Brad Holmes is most likely focusing on the draft. Because the way he's attacked, or rather been, kind of laid back in the free agency period so far, it seems like what Brad Holmes did is he wanted to go out, make sure he found someone to replace Carlton Davis. He did that. But it seems to me that other than Josh Sweat, he wasn't really all that interested in any other edge rusher because realistically, so far, Brad Holmes hasn't really nibbled or shown any expression of interest at any other edge rushers. And as I said, the best edge rusher currently right now that's in free agency is the guy that we cut, which is Zadarius Smith. So it's like, okay, barring something happening, I don't really see the Lions making a move right now in free agency, at least not until the second wave of free agency happens after the draft. But as I also hinted in my previous episode, I said that it's possible that the Lions could decide to double dip or they could decide to trade up in the draft to get somebody. Well, here's the thing. It would seem more likely to me that Brad Holmes would probably want to trade up to get a guy he really truly wants, because the fact that he hasn't really gone after anybody else other than Josh Sweat, who went to the Cardinals, tells me that he wants something very specific. He's looking for something very specific in a player. And to me, when you're trying to do something like that and you're going into the draft the way you are, that almost tells me that, okay, there's a good likelihood that Holmes is going to try and make a trade up because he's going to want somebody very specific. Now, who could that potentially be? Well, I'll say this. The one thing about this year's draft class is there are a literal number of options that Brad Holmes could go as far as good, high-end quality pass rushers. But when we're talking about those, there's only really 2 guys that I think that Brad Holmes could trade up far enough to potentially make a run for. Now, who are these guys that I'm talking about? What are these premier pass rushers in the draft that I'm talking about? Specifically, the 2 that I'm talking about are Mike Green out of Marshall and James Pearce out of Tennessee. These are the 2 guys that I think that the Lions could trade up high enough for that are instant plug in, you're going to get something good out of these guys, especially when you pair them with what the Lions already have in terms of the defensive line coach, in terms of what talent we already have on the defensive line unit. These are guys that I could see come in and they could really make a difference, make an impact right away. Now, why do I think that? Well, one, both of the guys that I mentioned, Green and Pearce, they are extremely disruptive when it comes to being an edge rusher. They know how to get after the quarterback. They know how to cause disruption. That's number 1. Number 2, they're very explosive. These are guys that have great first steps. They know how to get around tackles. They have great pass rushing moves. These are guys that definitely are not going to need a whole lot of mentoring, so to speak. They're going to need some, but not a whole lot of mentoring to really get up to speed on how to attack tackles, how to get around them, how to get to the quarterback, because they've been doing it so well in college, especially the senior year. Let's first and foremost take a look at Mike Green. I haven't talked about Mike Green a whole lot because I was under the impression, I was like, okay, this guy's coming out of Marshall. They don't typically play a whole lot of top-end talent. But the fact that the Lions have sat down, they met with him at the Combine, the fact that Mike Green is considered such a high prospect, it's like, okay, I'm going to take a look at him and I'm going to give you my opinion. And the reason I'm saying this is because, one, just because this guy comes from a school that's not like, a USC, a Georgia, an LSU, or Michigan, something like that, should not instantly discredit him from being an option for the Lions. And when you think about it, and you take a look at his numbers, as I'm sure a lot of other people have, there's very good reason for it. Number one, in college, he had 22 and a half sacks, and this is over 3 years, 2 of which he was primarily a starter. So it's like, okay, pretty much in 2 years, this guy got almost 23 sacks. That's impressive. That's definitely something to pay attention to. Number two, in those same 2 years, he pretty much got almost 90 pressures. So again, something else to pay attention to. His previous year, his last year that he played, he had a 21% almost pass rush win rate, had 17 sacks, and 56 of his 85 pressures. Pretty much what that tells me is that this previous year, he really put it together as a pass rusher. Something clicked for him. And that tells me that, okay, potentially when he goes to the next level, if you get a good coach, you get a good supporting network, you get a good bunch of guys that can really help this guy, he should be able to make the transition from playing, kind of like small D1 college football or, not necessarily, like SEC level or freaking Big Ten level, Division I football to NFL level football. Because we have seen it happen, and Mike Green seems to be a guy that could absolutely do that, especially with the production that he had in his senior year. Or in this case, his junior year, but the year that he's coming out for the draft. So that's Mike Green. Now, James Pearce. I've talked about James Pearce before. I called him a freaking human missile because this is a guy that has a fast first, second, and third step. This guy has an innate nose freaking getting after the quarterback, is able to get on him in a hurry. This is a guy that I really, really like. And there's a reason why I do. One, when you take a look at his career, he's had almost 20 sacks, so almost the same amount of sacks as Mike Green. He's had more pressures than Mike Green over the course of his career. He's had 107. But then when you take a look at his last season in college, yes, he doesn't have 17 sacks like Mike Green had. He has 7.5. But he has the same amount of pressures in 5.5, and he has a much better pass rush win rate at 23%. So when you take a look at both Green and Pearce, there are two things that instantly should jump out to you. One, these guys are very good at winning pass rushing sets. They're very good at getting to the point of attack and getting after the quarterback. That's number one. Number two, these guys are very good at still applying pressure to the quarterback without necessarily sacking them. I mean, for crying out loud, when you take a look at their last years in college, one had 56, the other had 55 pressures. These are guys that know how to make a quarterback's life either a living hell by constantly sacking them or by constantly getting in their face and applying pressure. And again, we've heard Dan Campbell talk in the past about how, listen, sacks are great, but the constant ability to put the quarterback under duress, to get in his face, to pressure him, that is just as good, because what happens is when quarterbacks constantly get pressured, they get antsy. They start having a faster clock in their head, which typically means they start making bad decisions. So a pressure is almost as good as a sack. It's not the same level of good, but it's just as good. Now, why do I also think Brad Holmes could go this route other than just getting a guy he truly, really likes? You have to think about it on the back end here. Let's say that Brad Holmes makes this decision, decides to trade draft picks to move up and get one of these two guys that I'm talking about, Green or Pearce. Well, what he's going to do by doing that is he's in essence going to save cap space later on down the road, because he's not going to have as many draft picks that he's going to have to re-sign or extend in the future. So even though, let's say, Green or Pearce comes in and absolutely tears it up, they earn themselves a big contract, by only having to sign one of those guys, and you have to trade away draft picks, you're in essence trading away another guy that you would have to spend money on that would get a moderate contract, and then plugging that into the guy you're getting with your first round pick and making sure that he's well taken care of. So you are going to save money that way. The second thing it does is by saying, okay, we're getting rid of a draft pick. That's more effective cap space that the Lions could use for the second round of free agency. Because like I said earlier in this episode and in the previous episode, the second round of free agency usually starts right after the draft. So now the Lions have a little bit more cap space to play with than what they originally thought. At that point, then, the Lions could still go out in free agency and get a veteran guy to help in the rotation to make sure that, hey, you know what? We're not relying just solely on Davenport. We're not just solely relying on Hutch. We're not just solely relying on Green or Pearce if we select one of those guys. We have at least 3 or 4 guys that we can rotate in or out, make sure they're constantly being rested, make sure they're constantly effective, so that way not one particular guy is constantly having to apply the pressure, as has been the case with Hutch in the past. Plus, on top of that, if you have multiple guys that can get after the quarterback and can apply pressure from multiple areas, it allows you to stack the box. It allows you to bring in other guys on multiple different areas, multiple fronts, to apply pressure from multiple areas. So having more than one edge rusher or one pass rusher can really effectively help your defense, not only in terms of applying pressure to the quarterback, but also in terms of making it much more difficult for that quarterback to make an effective read, either resulting in pass breakups, interceptions, incomplete throws, whatever the case might be. So for me, I think that this makes the most sense at the current moment of what Brad Holmes could do. Make a bold trade in the draft, give up some draft capital, not necessarily a couple picks, but maybe a solid mid-round pick to move up, maybe 10, 12, 15 spots from where you're currently at. Get a guy like Green, get a guy like Pearce. Then the money you save by not having to sign that extra draft pick, you can then go back into free agency, double down, double dip that way, and now you've got a solid edge rushing rotation where it's like, okay, we have youth, we have experience, we have explosion, we have multiple ways to making this work. That, to me, at this point, now looking at everything that has transpired or not transpired, as might be the case, makes the most sense. And again, it's still Brad Holmes making a bold and daring move. It's still him planning to do something. But again, it might not be as quick as what some folks are wanting. Because again, I know this for a fact. Lions fans do not like waiting. They do not like sitting on their hands trying to figure out what Holmes is going to do. They want constant updates. They want constant information. They want to feel like, okay, Holmes is doing something. Sometimes the best thing to do is do nothing and observe what is happening, because when you do that, you take in all the necessary information. You see what the rest of the league is doing. You understand, okay, this is who's really making a bid. What are they trying to do? How are they trying to make a bid to become a better team? How do I counteract that? How do I find a way to make my team better to, negate the upgrades that other teams are making? That's what I think is happening here. I think what Brad Holmes said is that, hey, you know what? Once we lost out on Josh Sweat, we need to now step back, take a look at what everyone's doing, and now make a plan accordingly going into the draft to make sure that, okay, the guy that we really want, we can make something happen, move up, get that guy, and then we can potentially go and readdress it again in free agency when the second round or second wave starts. That, to me, sounds like something Brad Holmes would do because it's smart, it's also observant, it's logical, it's reasonable, and on top of that, it's economical. It kind of checks all the boxes about what Brad Holmes has done in the past. So for me, it makes perfect sense. But Whether or not you guys think so or not, I don't know. Obviously, you guys will let me know. You guys will let me know whether you like it, whether you don't like it, whether you think it's a good idea, a bad idea. But again, as I've said in the past, please keep your comments respectful. Having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you haven't subscribed, if by chance you've subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also want to encourage y'all to share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you possibly can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel can grow and spread. And with that being said, I hope you all got something out of this content, whether you learned something, thought of something new, and also, please, I hope you enjoyed it. But whatever the case might be, whether it's the first time you're watching me, you guys have been watching me forever and a day, I truly hope that that's what happened. I also hope you guys have something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.